and welcome to another episode of Speculative Speculations. I'm Varsha.
I'm Steve.
I'm Dan.
I'm Chris.
And finally, I'm Jared.
Jared had to wait so long to have his name said.
Well done on staying awake.
This is a series where we talk about speculative stories in all their forms. You'll get to hear more of the intro music this time because that went a bit longer than usual. Today, we are back with a new book. We finished Children of Memory last week. Today's discussion will be for the first 6 chapters of The Windup Girl by Paolo Bacigalupi. I hope I'm saying that name right.
Wow.
The short story for today is The Game of Rat and Dragon by Cordwainer Smith. And I am eagerly waiting to hear what Steve thinks of it. Most of the rest of us read it for the SF Masterworks reading group, where we read one SF Masterworks every month. Go check that out if you're interested in the longer discussion for the entire collection of what is it? The Rediscovery of Man, not the Instrumentality of Man. That's a different series. Okay. Not exactly, but kind of. And the short story for next week will be The Last Question by Isaac Asimov. So with that, we start off with the discussion of The Windup Girl. Starting with how much I love the cover. There's got a big-ass elephant on it.
Well, is it an elephant, though?
No, it's not. It's a megadont.
Megadont, indeed. Although I have to say, like it is portrayed, but I thought it was going to be more like rhino-like, wider. I sort of had it in my head rather than more traditional. But I suppose that's part of the themes to kind of jump off, which is this idea that people don't really understand what the past was or what they had in the past, or kind of like old creatures and things like that. There's sort of like genetic engineering so prevalent in this world as they try and rediscover science in a lot of ways that they kind of don't know what fruits were and, you know, all that kind of stuff.
I thought that they did know, but they just like all people in the past didn't realize how wasteful they were being with all these finite resources, right? And they could probably do it again now, but they don't have the base resources to do it, so they have to, use springs and
do it some other way.
Yeah.
It's almost as if the good old elephant wasn't efficient enough for what they needed to do, and so they improved it in some ways, in mass size, just general, that kind of stuff, and that I sort of had it in my head that it was a bit more unrecognizable from being an elephant in that way, but, that's almost interpretation of reading. In some ways, I don't think it explicitly kind of put that out there.
Yeah. Did you get the impression that elephants are extinct and they use the genetics of the elephant and maybe the mammoth to bring back a giant creature that they can use as a factory?
Yeah,
that was pretty much it.
That's actually a good turn of phrase you had there, Vasha. The impression, because there's a lot of stuff in here left up to impression in how you interpret what he's saying in this story. Because, man, he uses a lot of strange words and like made up words, I think, and or words borrowed from other cultures that he throws into the an English novel. That it's still a lot of strange words that we're not familiar with, and it takes a while to get used to them, and that lends itself to impressions of what these things can be and what a lot of stuff stands for in this narrative.
Yeah. And I think the words might be from the Thai language. I don't know.
I suspect so.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Thai words in here, and maybe some Malaysian and other ones too. But
I think different people use words in different languages, right? There's some Japanese words too mentioned, and each one has their own.
Yes, there was Japanese words. Yeah, and there was a lot of it used as slang, which of course slang has its own connotation beyond just being from a different language. It's also a different meaning within the language. And so
That's right.
you have to really bear down to try to interpret what's being said and what's and some of the stuff that's going on.
Yeah, that language was almost it was very interesting for me to read because it was just this close to Hindi, but it wasn't really. So it's like I should understand this, but no, I don't. I have no idea what it means. Almost understand it. And I guess the other thing that really stood out to me about the language and like a lot of the culture, like one is I've been following some folks on YouTube. Like there's a Vietnamese person I follow and some other more Eastern Asian people of that culture. And what they tell us on YouTube, like they vlog about their lives, and like what they tell us is like very similar to how I grew up, and that was interesting for me because I think Western culture like feels, at least American Western culture feels vastly different to how I grew up during my time here. So there was that. So I saw a lot of that in this book represented. Like these could be he could be describing a city in India, the streets and like the vendors there, the hawking and the big temple and everything that he described. And if you go to South India, you'll find an elephant randomly standing outside a temple. There are some temples that keep elephants, I think, because of I guess the Ganesh connection. I don't know.
Yeah.
And also there was a name for a god with a elephant head, which I think is maybe their version of the Ganesh elephant-headed god. They didn't call him that, but had the same name. So I know, like I've never studied up on the history of all of this, but I know there's a lot of Indian diaspora around like islands, the Asian islands, right? I think
it goes into Thailand and even Cambodia. There's a lot of Hindi influence in those regions. Yeah.
Well, there used to be Hindu before, but I guess Muslims came and the Buddhists and all the other cultures afterwards, right? That's why. What is it? Bali is the only remaining one, I guess. The main remaining one was Aries, but still Hindi. But,
yeah.
So you can see a mix of all these cultures, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
getting into this kind of reminded me of getting into Sea Poppies that Barsha made me read, and, and so, which was good. It was a good book, and but the difference here being this is set in the far future, and Sea Poppies was a historical novel, so it was very interesting delving into a culture and society based upon stuff today, but the author's trying to make it vastly different to suit his future setting as well. And so it was it took a bit for me to like get used to it.
Yeah, I was really interested to hear what you were going to say about it, Varsha, because I think sort of the appeal for me at the moment is this, what to me is quite an exotic setting, if you know what I mean, in terms of like being very different from the way that I grew up and stuff, and you actually talking about it being the flipping the other way around, being nostalgic almost, and actually how that excitement fits, and like this fits a sci-fi kind of culture, whereas for you it probably feels a bit different. So I think that's so interesting.
Yeah, it did. Like Jared said, remind me a little bit of Sea of Poppies. Like that came to mind because I think that might be the most recent book I've read by an Indian author. Maybe I could be misremembering, but or at least an Indian author who did what this author is doing, which is throwing in words from the language of the place and in the text, right? Which Amitav Ghosh did that with Bengali, and he did some pidgin English, and I struggled with that because I don't speak Bengali. And this is similar. Like it feels just familiar enough, but also different enough that there's some stuff that I have to like pay attention to and follow. But yes, mostly it's he's writing about home, which is again interesting because I don't think I've read any other sci-fi that's set in a culture like mine, like, set in a place like my home. So that's interesting. It makes me want to read River of Gods. Like that's been on my list a lot, but I feel like I'm more excited about it now.
It may give me a lot of sort of, like future, what's it called, cyberpunk fake
Yes.
feel, but instead of being Japan and China sort of inspired as it usually is, here it's more like Southeast Asian, but like fits sort of vibe that it gave me.
Yeah, it has that Blade Runner thing to it. I was thinking about Blade Runner as well through it, even though like it's a very new future, which this doesn't really come in, but you definitely get that vibe of how prevalent and influential Asian culture, especially Japanese, in this kind of world as well, about how those corporations have sort of influenced the indigenous culture, if you know what I mean, that is there. And that this, again, that impression that Jared talked about, that these things are happening, it's the corporations and their nationality that is bleeding over rather than it being like an invasion or a colonialism kind of thing, which is, no evidence that I have so far of that rather than just the corporation work side of it.
Yeah, I guess corporations are sort of colonizing, right? Which is similar in some ways to the British colonization, in that the East India Company was primarily responsible, I think, for the eventual colonization. So that I like that interpretation. It's mostly, and that's what they're fighting against, right? Like, do not give the sort of quote unquote selfish corporations who admittedly make short-term decisions for profits versus, and that's the damn, and this was another thing that wasn't clearly stated, but I got the impression that that's what led to the collapse and the state that they are in now, where they have to do a lot of gene hacking to make work, like to create food, they don't have electricity anymore because something was systematically and structurally destroyed to the point where they now have to put people. Well, I guess factories also have a list, like the mechanical factories also have a great amount of risk for the people who work there, but the elephant thing feels somehow a lot worse. Like, I keep wanting to say elephant, but the megalodon.
He really paints a bleak future of resource management in this opening salvo here.
It's very modern, right?
Yeah. My favorite thing about the book, I have to say, and in reading it, is the incidental throwaway lines that build the world for you and build the history of the world for you, that indicates something else completely for it. So, I mean, you just said it there. There is no real indication of the cataclysmic event that has happened in this world at all. But I think that he hints that it was overpopulation in its own right, that ate up all the resources. Right. This idea that the technology and resource is way more valuable than human life kind of indicates that overpopulation, like humans and people as a commodity, there's so many of them, like that's not a problem. Whereas foodstuff and resource is way more valuable than that, even though they're genetically producing them. So like there's little instances like that, and there's lots of them, like the missing fingers of the wife, etc., the girlfriend, indicate that there's way more story here in the background, and it always, or certainly for me, you perk up and go, what does that mean? It holds its interest, and especially like these 110 pages for me, 7 pages for other people, apparently, it turns out. It was all very much about setting the scene and getting interest in what is quite a wide character base.
Yeah, but I was only able to read 1 page a day. So.
4 hours it took.
I think what Chaya, the wife, she was introduced for like 2 minutes, and I got really interested in her. Apart from Hoksane, is he the Malay person who? No, the Chinese person who was.
Well, he's passing himself off as Malay, isn't that this kind of thing at the moment? He's like he's close enough that he feels like he can blend in.
Yeah. So he's possibly the one I'm most interested in at the moment, and of course, the fact that the book is named for her brings automatic interest to the Windup Girl that we meet. But yeah, it went from like if I'm being honest, the first 5 or 6 pages, I started to roll my eyes up a little bit because we were going on and on about a fruit that this guy found. But then it got really interesting, I think, with the rest of the setup. And so the first 5 pages in retrospect started to make more sense, which I still don't know why that fruit that he discovered is so important. But you kind of get the sense that it could be for such a world as he is in at the moment.
Yeah, the fruit's important for resource management, really, because they need more resources. And so if that's something that is able to be grown in this area that had not previously been grown before, then that would be a huge step up for the local populace, at least.
Well, it was being grown in the 2000s, I guess, right? Because it was in the picture that he saw.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But, yeah. I just sort of assume that everything that happened, it kind of seems like it's all the current worries, like rising sea level, global warming, monoculture being vulnerable to disease, lack of genetic diversity, overpopulation, non-renewable resources. Like it kind of seems like all these things almost all happened, right? And this is like what happens after, sort of.
Yeah. Is there an actual seawall in Thailand now, or is that
I don't think
post?
So.
Yeah. Okay. that I need to understand how that even works. A wall against the sea.
Yeah.
But that's so cool as a metaphor for what they were saying about the people of that place too. I love that comparison he made at one point.
I mean, the Dutch have seawalls now, right? I assume it's something like that, but even more, I would assume.
They're actually planning one for Boston, I believe.
Oh, that's how you do it. You start building it before it actually comes. Makes its way.
Bit by bit, I would assume.
But they also alluded to the fact that lots of countries and cultures haven't made it. Like they have died out throughout the book. So this is just one area where they still have like maybe an unhealthy and unhappy sort of alliance at the moment of corporations needing the labour and the workforce, and there's been very tenuous kind of relationships there.
Yeah.
And it looks like they are planning seawalls in Thailand because of rising sea levels. So it is moving. Looks like there's some debate over how to do it, but it looks like it's going to happen.
Interesting.
Yeah, so what did you think, Steve, of the first 6 chapters?
I thought the first 4 chapters were more interesting. I think when the other 2 really reminded me a lot of Blade Runner, or was it Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?
Yeah.
The kind of especially the last chapter or so that we read, chapter 5 and 6. But I thought it was. I do like the setup of all the resources and the world and the way everything's set up. I like the workplace. Where's OSHA when you need them, kind of thing. With the runaway animal, but yeah, I thought it was, and I didn't really think of it until you all were talking about it, but it seems like there must have been a migration. You see these cultures that are intermingling that maybe didn't before, and the people in the factory are kind of like, oh, they're lazy, and these people, kind of sees them not as people, dehumanizes them, and I think Jared, you mentioned that they value resources over life. So it's more important for survival.
It seems like all these like dire straits heighten cultural tensions between different groups, and it seems like even like different nations, there seems to be quite a lot of animosity, I guess. Which is not, we don't always see that in sci-fi books. A lot of the time it's just like, oh, in the future everyone is humanity, right? But here it's like more pragmatic or something.
Go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say, and you'll have this, again, we've seen this in other sci-fi books that we've read, this multi-tier system of existence. So you actually have the rich and the corporations and the people that are running that. You then have the indigenous people, and then we have this Windup Girl or the synthetic people that we have there, and actually how they treat and intermingle with each other and relate to each other. That even though at the start of the book you think that the indigenous people are the most downtrodden, it goes another step below that even again, and I think that'll probably be explored throughout the rest of the book, of no doubt.
Yeah.
And then the refugees, right, which are also barely people, I guess.
Yeah.
I think it's mentioned a lot of times, like, they're not allowed to work, they're not allowed to like do anything pretty much. So it's kind of like, I don't know. I guess they're there, but nobody wants them there, really.
Yeah, that different strata you're talking about, Chris, was reflected in the relationship between Hawk Sing and, his Anderson Lake, his foreign devil, that he keeps calling him in the book. And it was interesting then that scene with after the elephants, went, or the megalodon, or whatever it is, went mad. Because he sits down Anderson. And he tells him not to go upstairs to get stitched up, because he wants him to be stitched up on the factory floor in front of the people down there, and in public where the workers could see him with his white tropical suit covered with blood, like and I don't know what this word is. It's spelled PHII, out of a graveyard, and I don't know if that's like some kind of zombie or ghoul or something like that. In Thai myth lore or whatever, but he wanted him to be unafraid, and that there was a lot of face to gain from that, and that the foreigner would seem fearless because Hawk Seng's goal is to keep this place running, to keep himself in a job, keep all the people that he's worried about in the factory working, and because otherwise the alternative is the streets. It's destitution. Even as hard and unfair as those working conditions may be in that place, it's still better than not having that job. And it just shows you that little incident, that little paragraph summed up the kind of straits that they're in this society, and really give you a good picture of what's going on.
Looks like there are islands called the Phi Islands. So I'm not sure what connection they may have, but there is an island.
An island, yeah. But what's a Phi out of a graveyard? I'm not sure what that is. But
apparently, it means ghost. But
ghost, okay.
Oh, okay.
And one of the articles that I found.
A blood-covered ghost.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. That's scary. And he's wearing white.
Yeah.
So it is a very, what's the word I'm looking for? Detailed? No. Vivid. It's a very vivid horror picture.
Yes. And very metaphorical for what he was trying to do there. Yeah.
That's true. Yeah. So we meet Anderson, then we get a bit of Hawk Sing's backstory, which was pretty poignant. I think what stood out to me there in particular was the conversation he had with the person who used to work for him. First, when the man starts by giving him respect and then realizes he doesn't need to, and stops and calls him by name. And so that was very interesting, because do you think that gave an impression of how Hawk Sing maybe used to treat his people? Because if he was potentially nice to them, maybe they wouldn't have flipped on him like that. But the other thing that I thought was really well done in that interaction was how he felt very apologetic. He said, I'm going to grieve about this for the rest of my life, and I'll probably go to hell for it, but I'm sorry, I just do not have the courage to help you. I thought that exchange was brilliant.
Yeah.
I feel
Yeah,
like. Sorry,
go ahead.
go ahead, Jared.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was going to talk about. So go ahead. You're probably on topic. I'm not. So go for
No,
it.
that just reinforces some of the perceived societal differences that they have, but that these things can be, changed or overcome, or at least perceptively changed to suit the situation if your behavior is just a little different towards that person.
Mhm.
And
I assumed, I sort of assumed that what happened was just like, when something must have happened, I guess, like economically or maybe like, I don't know, the water went over the wall or something happened anyways in Malaysia, right? And then I guess the Muslim majority influenced by these extremists with like, what's it called? The green, green
Green
bandanas or something?
headbands, I
Green
think.
headbands, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they sort of like blamed it all on, as it always is, ethnic minorities like the Chinese and all the other ones, and they were, massacred and forced to flee, right? And in those cases, yeah, it's like it's hard to,
Yeah.
yeah, he's trying to stand up for, I guess, what he thinks is right. But
Yeah, and the other part of that, like we were talking earlier about like little bits that gave us a lot of information. This interaction told us so much about the man too. His sons apparently wear green headbands now, and he's worried that he's not even sure that they will let him go if they find out that he
yeah,
helped Hoxing, which again it's just in a there could be people like that now, right? This is a sci-fi book set in the far future, but it is about things happening now, like with many of these books that we admire. So, yeah.
yeah, and I felt like that sort of, I don't know, the father when I don't know, the son falls into some sort of weird radicalization hole, and he doesn't know anything about it, and he turns out is like he doesn't even recognize him, pretty much.
Yeah.
I don't know, that sort of feeling was very.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's even more mythology thrown in there. He prostrates himself before the image of Kuan Yin, and which is like the Chinese version of the Bodhisattva. Is that right? I can't.
Buddha, I guess.
Don't know if I got the
Yeah.
pronunciation right, but that is that that mythological blending that he's throwing in a lot of these pages. I really actually think that's pretty cool. I like how he did all that.
Yeah, a lot of times in sci-fi books, like authors sort of pretend that all the cultural, background and baggage that each culture has somehow disappears in the future, and everyone is enlightened or all things about modern things. But there's still gonna be all those things we bring from our past and traditions and everything, right? Which looks somewhat anachronistic, I guess, compared to other things that are in the same universe, but they're really not. It's just the history, right?
Yeah. I guess it depends on whether it's a dystopian future or a sort of post-scarcity future, right? If everybody's happy, and I would imagine that some of the quote-unquote evils of today's society wouldn't carry forward. But if they are not, then a lot of it might.
Well, we don't know.
We don't know, but I mean, it's more about like it makes sense. The speculation about that makes sense.
So you're saying happiness promotes homogeneity?
Oh, interesting. Well, not necessarily, right? We could have nice things that are different that aren't. But so I guess what would hopefully go away in a happy society is finding fault with each other for our differences. So we could all still be different, but not blame each other for it, which right now, the root of most of our problems is you're different, so I hate you. And that's probably what will hopefully go away in a post-scarcity society.
Yeah, embracing diversity. Yeah.
But it's probably also like a function of, the paradigm in which we are living. And so our brains sort of assume that the Western sort of progression of liberties and, sort of all the stuff that was, I don't know, from communism, etc. So in the future, like in enlightened society, there's no scarcity, there's no culture in the sense that we intend it now, there's no religion, right? All these things are overcome and we become one unified society. That's kind of sort of a paradigm in which our brain automatically slots in and we think it's going to be, but there's really no guarantee that it is, right? There's no guarantee that liberties will keep being expanded over, all those things will keep happening and there's some sort of trajectory to human evolution, but how to say it, we're going to end up there. It's not guaranteed, I think.
Yeah, I think this book actually does a decent job of, again, reflecting modern kind of thought and culture, that this kind of romanticism for the past, that things were better in the past, when demonstrably, in a lot of ways, that's just so not true. It's unbelievable. But to do that in this book here, over, the pictures of lemons and the wastefulness of people in the past, of farmers, and looking at that kind of thing and kind of criticizing the past in that way, rather than kind of romanticizing and saying, God, wasn't it better in the past because of their scarcity and their kind of society broken down, and they're using it as a mirror in the opposite way that we do often in society at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Sorry, was someone going to say something? Okay, I was going to ask about the Windup Girl. What did you guys think of her?
Emiko.
Miko,
What's her name? Sorry?
Emiko, which
Emiko.
to me is a Japanese name, right? I'm going to throw that out there, which, so I think that's quite an interesting choice within the society.
Yeah. I mean, he explains that. He explains her creation, I guess, and her origins. And like, I guess I guess she would be considered an android, right?
Yeah.
I mean, is she not just fully a robot? I don't think she has any human part, does she?
Skin has to be very smooth,
well,
that
she definitely.
But I thought the skin was manufactured. It's not like.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
But I think an android has to have, it's like a human, like part human. It has to have some part of it.
Oh, I thought that was a.
That's what I thought was the definition.
I thought that was a cyborg.
Oh, maybe.
Cyborg. An android is something that mimics humanity, I think, in robot form. It essentially is a robot, I think. But I'm mainly going off Star Trek for that, Dan, I have to be honest.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. It is an end. Okay, fair enough.
I must have, because I thought she was a creation, that she was human, but she was created.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't know she had robot parts. I thought she was just a human that was created with gene splitting and a lot. But
she was grown. Like she was grown.
Well, she moves in a mechanical way, right? So
it
has some mechanical parts.
But she's trained to move like that so that she looks more artificial, right?
Right. Okay.
I thought it was the other way around.
Like to dehumanize her, to make her seem like she's not a real person.
Right. Yeah.
But that's what I thought she was, is like a created for a certain purpose. And I guess if you can create life like that, isn't this like the inevitable life? Isn't this the inevitable with humans, if we are able to create life into, I don't know, I mean, I guess it's kind of seems like this is what happened eventually. Slavery, basically.
Yeah.
Well, but slavery for sex, quite predictably, in a lot of ways.
Well, in Japan, they're used. She says they're used for a bunch of other tasks and things, right? So, but the interesting thing about it to me was that like the rest of the book, we're setting up a premise that the book is talking about environmental topics and energy and stuff like, and then the Windup Girl story instead is talking about something completely different, right? It's talking about like the topics is like the rights of androids and robots, pretty much. So I'm interested to see how these two things like merge later in the book.
Yeah, I mean, she's definitely the creation of corporations, and the corporations are making a play to gain more control in Thailand. So how that's going to come into play with this particular Wind-Up Girl, it remains to be seen. But she did make a connection with Anderson, right? He's the one that told her. He tried to give her money. She's like, "What am I going to do with this? Nothing," and but he's the one who told her about the place the place where androids live, or whatever she is, that they live freely. Whether this place is real or magical, I'm not sure, but he told her about it, and it's interesting that she's programmed to a certain extent to react in certain ways, even if she doesn't want to. But it's interesting that she has the capability of not liking the way she has to react. So that gives some level of consciousness, some level of self-actualization, a self-realization that just a robot wouldn't have, or a machine wouldn't have. So there's a lot of implications there to how this could play out when she has that programming in her, but I guess the struggle is going to be either overcome it or bypass it somehow or what have you. We'll see.
When I read it, I was thinking that it made me think that how they created the brain or the whatever circuits of these androids was that they studied the human brain and then they replicate it, and then they sort of, I don't know, force some things to force certain behaviors. But because it was created by corporations, they were like, okay, well, we'll force the androids to obey us. But it's going to be a lot more work and a lot of money to also make them like it. So who cares? We're just going to make them force them to obey us. And even if they feel sad about it, we don't care because they have to do it anyways. And that felt very much like what would, corporations in a dystopic future would do, I guess. But I have no proof that that's how they did it. So just so imagine it.
Yeah.
There's so many. It seems like there's a trope now of making an evil corporation everyone's problem. So I think you need other elements to introduce to make it interesting, because it's so used now and everything is, corporations are evil, and it's like you need to build on the story to add the resources and add the other things happening to make it interesting, instead of just like this boogeyman, the evil corporation. It's like that's. I can read the headlines today and I can get that. Like, give me something else. Like, give me more. Like, let's introduce different elements.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think the wind up part of her name means? Do you think it's just metaphorical for artificial person, or like does she actually have mechanical parts that involve springs? In which case, it's really interesting that they are producing springs with more energy.
Well, because springs are the only way that they can store energy, right? So she must have a spring that they reload every once in a while, I guess. I don't know. That's what I assumed. So that's what I assumed. I assumed it was some sort of like there was a spring and there was some sort of mechanical contraption that was making her work on top, and then on top some mix of organic and science to make her look like.
Yeah,
that's what
that makes sense.
But yeah. And I also want to mention above the Windup Girl, like the scene, the sexual assault scene, the rape scene, where it was very hard to read.
Yeah.
I have to say. It was very powerful. And
Yeah.
it made me feel really bad for her. Like,
Yeah. Like I've read quite a lot of sexual assault scenes in different kind of genres of the thing, but the way that they set her up and her premise as being completely in service, and then by bookend it by basically she was paid, but she can't even get the value of getting money for herself. Like, it means absolutely nothing to her and her existence and kind of what happens there. She's sort of hoping comes out in her death, and that made it even more distressing in a lot of ways, because it wasn't just a physical violation of her, it was just a compounding of her existence and kind of the level that he had. And it means when he gives her the crumb at the end to say that there are a lot of people that have escaped, that's the one chapter in this that ends on a high, you know what I mean? That ends on a real moment of, right, I can see a progression for the story. I can see a drive through the story where everything else kind of just sets the scene and moves on to another character. Whereas that one's like, okay, there's impetus created, but very, very difficult to read. Even though I would argue it wasn't even very explicit in the ways that described it, in kind of using more metaphorical language, describe it, but with you knowing as a reader exactly what was happening, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and I thought it was also more powerful because we know that in the current world, like Bangkok is a location for sexual tourism, and a lot of people are abused in similar ways there, right? So I think there's a clear connection there.
And there was also the implication that I think the person managing her, took some sort of pleasure in her pain, I guess. And that also, I guess it made it all the more difficult.
Yeah.
And well, a lot of the patrons too, right?
Yeah. And I think that kind of ties into how she was obtained by this joint, this sleazy joint, this owner. She was traded to him like a or he bought her like a piece of equipment, and that's how he treated her. And that is the fear and the concern over corporations delving into AI and into producing servants that can look like us and be other at the same time. And that's like that is the concern, and that is how these situations come about.
Yeah. And to me, it also touched on the topic of, I guess, consent, in a sense, because even if her body technically was, I guess, consenting to it, and like even her from the scripture saying, like, her body was making her feel pleasure from it, because that's what her body's made for. But that doesn't mean she was still suffering through it. She was not consenting to it, and that's that's also. It's a sci-fi situation for something that happens to your life. It doesn't mean like if your body is behaving a certain way, like you're consenting. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It was also, there was a contrast to it with Chaya as well, and the flirtations and the things when he came home and she slapped his hand away, but ultimately, there was a consent there from it, and you can get that parallel a couple of chapters later, which I think was like very, very effective. I just think the details that are within the pages here are what I'm really digging about it, if you know what I mean. I think it's a quite complex kind of sociological system being set up, all of that kind of stuff, but the details give you all of the nuance that you need out of it.
Yeah, I was very intrigued by the Tiger of Bangkok. I thought he was a very interesting character. I thought he was just a snot-nosed punk to begin with, but then you get into his family life and you get into what he's faced with, from the other side, other than just the street confrontation he was in. And and you start to see where he's coming from. And I liked there was a lot of great characterization there with his introduction, and exploring his character with his family, and it was pretty cool.
Yeah. His partner is also intriguing. What's her name? Kanika? No. Kanya?
Chaya,
Yeah.
I think or no,
Chaya's-
Kanya.
Work partner, yeah. Chaya's the wife, and Kanya is
It's the other one.
Ratana, right? No,
Oh.
that's his other partner. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Kanya.
There's a lot of characters in this. So I will say
Yes.
that is that it is a bit of a struggle, I have to say, at this point, because we have basically 5 point of views or something like that. That's what it feels like. That's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. No, like I said to start with, it did take me a while to really get into it and wrap my head around it all. But I think eventually he's doing something pretty cool with this future setting and something different.
Yeah. Felt pretty smooth going into it. Like there was always like a thread of narrative you could focus, even though you weren't understanding all the other things that were happening, all the terms, right? And it was kind of an organic way of showing you things. It didn't feel like forced, or it felt quite well done to me.
Yeah, and they were all connected. Like they introduced a lot of people, and it wasn't, oh, here's 5 seemingly unconnected things, and let's see how they converge. It's here's this tiny little thing that's connecting this person and this person. Like with Anderson and the Windup Girl was like his investigation into where the Ngaw came from. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but and then with this customs officer Jayadi, it was about I guess the stuff that they needed from customs for the factory that Hoxing was counting on to go talk to the drug lord, is it, to make his name? Not the drug lord, the water,
some crime leaders,
some guy. And then Hoxing and Anderson, of course, we know how they're connected. He works for the guy. Were there any other POVs? So I like that, like, it's not a blatant big, they're all part of the same thread kind of connection yet. We don't know, maybe, like, we don't yet know what the central connecting thread of it all is. But I like that they're all connected by, like, this, like, one little thing through the story.
Yeah. And there was one little mention of the past when somebody was returning here with cognacs, which hasn't been seen since the days of the expansion with a capital E. And I was thinking that's probably like the European expansion across the globe. That was what the idea I got from that. But I was like, okay, but he didn't like lay it out. He just gave you that little hint of the past of what people used to think of the world, and now it's a whole different setting and economy compared to what it used to be.
So that's an interesting one that you brought up, Jared. I thought, I mean, that was what I thought originally, that he's talking about the European expansion. But what it also seemed to me to be is just our current times, where every company has a foothold in every other country, and like basically globalization, I think, is what he's referring to as the expansion. I don't remember what made me think that, not the few centuries ago expansion, just like the current expansion, I think.
That's true. That's true. It might be another version of European, because the globalization was, was the result of the United States winning World War II and expanding from there. So yeah, it could be more of a economic globalization expansion rather than actual colonization, per se.
Yeah, kind of like the fake empire from the Children of Time series. Cool. Are there any other characters we're missing? We didn't talk about that poor elephant that died.
I know.
That was brutal.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that felt like a waste, and not in the way they mean in the book. Of energy. Just such a huge creature, when it dies like that, it felt like such a waste of life, and also how it's used, I guess, but how it died more so.
So here's the question, and I probably should have reread of this. Do we know what triggered it exactly?
I thought the mahout was being cruel, and the elephant reacted to that, and one thing led to another, and it got out of control.
Got out of control at that stage.
Yeah, because somebody was warning somebody that you better not do that anymore, or something like that.
Well, Anderson was saying that.
Yeah, so I got the conversation.
You should go there.
Yeah. So there was a little bit of a lead up to it, saying, "Hey, somebody should do something." Then nobody did, and what Anderson predicted happened. And
but the question about it really was, yes, I mean, I got that part of it, but it felt coincidental that the events with Anderson, then, like, Hoksang seems like he has way more control over that situation than it led on. It was sort of coincidental that those kind of events led each other, and then he ended up getting hurt, and that kind of stuff, with the view that Hoksang was going, just need to get into the safe. If I could just get into the safe, do that, open it up. So that's what I'm saying. I wouldn't be surprised if something else happened there to set that out, or that was ordered or instigated, or something happened there.
I don't think Hoksang was the one. Like, he was surprised. That's not what he wanted to happen either. It was just because he wasn't planning on getting to a safe. It's just he noticed it when he forgot to close or something. Right, he was hoping. Yeah. He was hoping would forget to close it. Right.
This is just me going into wild, incorrect theories. This is just what I do.
It's necessary.
Well,
although I don't necessarily agree that your theories are wild and whatnot, but it's funny regardless. But there was also another scene as part of that elephant dying, that when they picked up the machine and the girl went in to see what was broken, that was scary as hell too, because we were told that the men holding it up are tired, but they have to, so she doesn't get crushed underneath it. That was terrifying too. That was a well-written scene.
Yeah.
Cool. Anything else from
Well,
this
what do you guys
book?
think of this line?
Oh, yes.
Dog fucker is a businessman.
What's his business?
Well, I mean,
I was like, really? That's the guy's name? Wow.
He has to do two things, and he's done all his business.
Oh boy,
we can get a lot of trouble in this one, but
To me, it felt like I don't know, because I think in those cultures, like, dogs are seen as dirty in a lot of those cultures, so it's like very that's what people called him, so that's why he started calling himself, because he doesn't give a shit, right?
It says that you're trying to justify his actions here, Dan. I'm just going to put that out there.
No.
I don't know anything about this guy. Maybe he's a nice guy. We don't know anything about him.
Lovely fella, yeah. Dog fucker, lovely fella. That's what they say.
Maybe it's his name was his wife or something. I don't know.
Oh God. Hello. We're gonna have to knock the rating up on this this podcast. There you go.
Yes, I think I just started doing that by default. Now I don't remember what we said in each episode.
Wow.
It's hard to keep up.
It's a bit like when I went to see Once Upon a Time in Hollywood in the cinema, and I remember that it was an 18 going in, and about 15 minutes before the end going, I can't understand why this is an 18 at all in this film. And then literally at the moment my brain went, why is this an 18? The whole film exploded, and I was like, this is definitely an 18. Yeah. Anyway.
That's true. Cool. Any other interesting lines you want to highlight for us, Chad?
Again, I'll just put this out there. That felt a bit too planned. Hawk Sing is Pinletter Jared here, you know.
Makes sense.
I don't know what you're talking about.
All right. In that case, are we ready to move on to talking about the game of Rat and Dragon? Oh, before we go, after we finish Windup Girl, I think we have another 3 or 4 weeks on it. We will be moving on to Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler, if you'd like to read along with us. And Dan, do you want to hang around for the game of Rat and Dragon?
I can see why you would do that, but yes, I keep on getting it wrong too.
No,
Yes.
I have other things which involve food to do.
Okay.
So
Don't eat your dinner.
Food eater. Dan, food eater. Don't know how I got that nickname,
Food
but
it could be worse. Could be worse.
Food eater is a businessman.
yeah, I know a guy.
Okay. See you next week.
See you, Dan. All right. So, of course, I would like for Steve to start us off on this one. Gimme, Steve.
Okay, so all right, so the beginning, I really liked the beginning when it set up all the different kind of felt like it was taking itself a little bit more seriously. And it was not that I don't mind goofy, silly stories, but it really felt like it was going to be and it did take itself seriously, and it was detailed. I like all the detail. And then the cats are in, I kind of put together what was happening with the cats and the dragons and the rats. I thought that was pretty cool. And it gets kind of silly, but it's also very serious at the end. So it's kind of this weird, like, it's very serious, but then it's also kind of silly in a way with the
Goofy.
cats.
Yeah.
So it was I enjoyed it. It was kind of strange, but it was. I'm guessing if you are a big fan of cats, you'll really enjoy this one.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, if this story was written today, all the cat memes would be all over the internet. It would go viral with all the cat memes.
That's true.
That's true.
Yeah.
I forgot to do summary.
Do you want to go ahead? Yeah.
Okay,
I can't wait to hear the summary, though. Let's go for it.
So, in the instrumentality of mankind, in the world of the instrumentality, there is space travel is dangerous because there is a great pain that hits you. And I think in the first few stories of the rediscovery of man, we don't really know what it is. And even in the story, it's kind of unclear. But they have discovered that the thing that makes space travel difficult takes the shape of a dragon, and so humans fight dragons in space. There are specialized humans that fight dragons in space, and then they discovered that cats are maybe better at the fighting of the dragons, except the cats see them as rats and not dragons, and so humans and cats pair up to fight these weird creatures in space, which are 2-dimensional, by the way. 2-dimensional creatures in space, and they build bonds, and then at the end of the story the man thinks that cats are better than women, which is a great thought to have. Is this the one where he has that thought?
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
That's the very last line. Where would
Yes.
he ever find a woman who could compare with his cat?
Yes. So that fantastic opinion of women aside, this was one of my favorite stories in the rediscovery of man.
You know the people.
Okay, so go ahead, Chris. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, people who listen along here that complain that we don't do wrap-ups have heard that wrap-up of that story and went, I can see why they don't do wrap-ups.
I'm sorry I asked. Yeah.
No, it's not, definitely one of those things. I think it's an absolutely legendary and brilliant wrap-up, Varsha. Like, I actually think you succinctly put it together. Fantastic. But it also, you're getting into the head of Cordwainer Smith a bit. Sorry, Steve, for interrupting you.
Oh no, I was just wondering what. Okay, I guess the ending can be taken several different ways, but is it because I took it in a more serious way that he had bonded with the cat and he depends on the cat to survive. So they have this bond together, this life and death bond, and they're doing these things together. But I guess you could take it and kind of put a humorous twist on it, but I'm not sure what the humor part of it, but I'm sure you could find a humor, like take it like in a funny way. But I took it with more of a serious way that we bond with people or animals that we experience these really traumatic life and death experiences with. So, yeah, but I'm not sure if it was supposed to be funny. So maybe it's just me.
I think the humor comes from the fact that he was just talking with a woman right before that line, and she basically yelled at him. The
cat's not going to yell at him, right?
You pin lighters in your damn cats. That's what she says. And so I think she was insulted by him and took off, and so I think that kind of said something about where his head was at when he made that last thought, which is humorous, but it also could be kind of a serious thought by somebody who was just put through that situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he did bond with the cat really well, so maybe I'm giving him too much flack for nothing. So the cat did treat him. I forget, I didn't reread the story for this discussion. So does the cat die in the end? Or does she only get severely hurt? And does the cat shapeshift, or is there an implication that she shapeshifts in this one?
As far as I remember, this is the Flurkin story.
No.
So the Guardians of the Galaxy one? No? Or is that where the cats multiply? I have the wrong story.
No, that's not that one. Yeah, no, not this one. This one,
like what? I must have missed that.
I mean, let me be clear. When we were reading this at the time, and you were making your way through these short stories, none of it made any sense. Each of those stories were kind of like you thought completely disparate, made no sense until about the 8th story when I kind of went, "Oh my god, this whole world is interconnected," and sort of made sense of it in a way. Like I won't fool anybody by saying it makes complete sense. It's sort of like, broadly speaking, but some of the things just started to blow your mind a little bit because it just seemed like the inane ramblings of an absolute madman. Every small story that went through, with their own themes, except that were going on. But in some ways, I think it's also sort of genius.
And the thing about that last line is he also was kind of just saying, they're just cats, like the whole story, And he was like, there was even one line he said, they're companionable enough as long as you just think images. But if you recite Shakespeare, or try to tell them what space was, they're no good. And so he has that contrast in his head, and then he finally says at the end about the where would he find a woman that could compete with the cat? And so it's just I thought it struck me as funny, but
yeah.
I guess I think with as far as pets go, I think you could, I think some people prefer pets because they're, they like having that companionship. So yeah, I guess I always look at the serious side of things, so that's probably why I went to he's bonded with the cat, and he's, I don't say he's sure these experiences with the cat, so that's why he feels this connection with the cat. And he feels like the cat understands him, and he understands the cat. That sounds really creepy, but I'm gonna be quiet now.
Well, they have a mental bond. It makes sense.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
It's also revealed to us that they are cats, right? They are called by names, like they have a title before that, and then we find out only partway through the story that they're actually cats. Before that, we get a whole lot already about how they bond and how they have this mental connection and so on. And yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. I think that was one of the reasons why I really loved that story the first time I read it. Well, the only time I read it. Anything else about this?
I really liked the whole the explanation of how it all worked. I thought that was really cool. That was really neat. I thought that was pretty, and it did give this really vast feeling of space and space exploration and the dangers in space, and I really liked all that. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I really like that too. And I think I love the puzzle of the 2D dragon. They're traveling through space, and that apparently makes the whole. It's dangerous to travel through space, but for like such an unconventional reason. It's not the vast distances, it's not the emptiness, it's not the radioactivity. It's freaking 2D dragon.
You never know what's out there, right?
Yeah. Or 2D rats, I guess. Either way. So, anything else?
Well, I would just want to say, if you like the strangeness of this story, just read more of Cordwainer Smith, and you'll get your strangeness.
Yes.
He's out there.
This is one of the less strange stories even, right? The first story in that collection is a man whose body is partway replaced by a box.
What? Really?
I'm gonna reiterate. I found some of it absolute genius. I have to say, I just love the fact that this guy wrote these short stories throughout his writing career as a psychologist, writing very serious non-fiction kind of stuff, and that every couple of years he would produce one of these stories and publish it in one of the short story collection, like Amazing Stories and all of that kind of stuff. So I'm sure he built up a following, and people would have been like, "Oh my god, we've got a new Cordwainer Smith story come out. This is incredible." I actually, part of the reading of that book includes that kind of feeling of going through the stories like that, especially because the book has a timeline of when the stories came out and where they all fit together, and it's brilliant in so many ways, but absolutely unreadable in lots of others.
No, I agree with you. I really enjoyed some of the stories, and some of them that I've thought back to a lot. And I read recently that Lavi Tidar, who is an author I love, was one of his influences was Cordwainer Smith. Like what he did with Central Station in some ways was, I think, an attempt to do what Cordwainer Smith did with the instrumentality of instrumentality of mankind, but rediscovery of man, right?
That's right.
And so what Tidar, I guess, attempted to do with Central Station is sort of build this picture of this expanded universe, but much like Smith did with those short stories, where I think we talked about this during the SF Masterworks discussion, where each story only gives us a glimpse of the world, but together they have this depth to them of the universe in which it is set. I think it's pretty brilliant to be able to do that.
I agree.
Mother Hitten's Little Kittens.
Yes,
Mother Hitten's Little Kittens. Feels like in jokes.
That's the one in Australia, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Australasia.
Australasia. That's
Something
right.
like that.
No, it's Australia.
Australia.
That's the book that was the follow up, which we will get to someday.
Yes. Yes, we should. Is that in the Masterworks?
Yeah.
It
I
is.
think
It
it
is.
Yep.
All right.
2034. We'll be reading that.
Yes.
Not too far off.
Fine.
Cool. Closing thoughts?
Excited
good?
for Windup Girl. A very promising start.
Yes, me too.
It's a standalone, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, it is. All right, then. We will see everybody in a week from now with up to, what did we decide? Chapter 13?
End of 13.
End
End of chapter
13.
13 of Windup Girl. And the last question by Isaac Asimov from the Big Book of Science Fiction as we continue to work our way through that book. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you in a week. Bye.